Job chapter 31. We are in chapter 31, if you can believe that. Now, we're not going to get as far as I'd have liked to. This has got 40 verses in it. Lord willing, we'll get through it, and hopefully in 3 weeks. When we get to Job 31, Job's already been going on for 5 chapters. His 3 friends are going to bow out and stop talking, and maybe Job thinks he's won the day, and then the young man that has accompanied them, Elihu, is going to step up and start talking. So Job's not through debating, but this last chapter is kind of like his summation of trying to vindicate himself in before his friends' eyes, and maybe even before God's eyes. So that's what he's doing in chapter 31. So there's not a lot of science in here that we're going to be looking up that I can see. I haven't gone all the way down through the verse, but we should be picking that up pretty soon here, I would think. But of course, Elihu's going to get on him here for about 4 or 5 chapters. So anyway, look at chapter 31, verse 1. And Job says, I made a covenant with mine eyes. Why then should I look upon a maid? I'm sorry? Oh, I'm sorry. I made a covenant with mine eyes. Why then should I think upon a maid? And that's important. For what portion of God is there from above, and what inheritance of the Almighty from on high? Is not destruction to the wicked, and a strange punishment to the workers of iniquity? Now we're going to start with those 3 verses there. Job's, I want to say one thing before I start that. When it comes to vindicating yourself, you're going to find out that most of the time, or at least some of the time, you can't do that. People will doubt you. If an accusation is made against you, a lot of times all you could do is wait for God to show the thing. That has happened to me a couple of times where I've had accusations made and I couldn't even figure out why they even made it. The person made the accusation. And it took several years for some things to come out. And once it came out, it was obvious why they made the accusation. And I'm not going to go into who and what and where. But what I'm saying is, sometimes you have to let God vindicate you. Because he says they'll say all manner of things against you. I mean, they'll make accusations. They did Jesus Christ. And a lot of times they just, anyone with good sense will, here's the problem. People don't follow the Bible when it comes to things like that. First of all, they never hear the other side before they've already made up their mind what's true and what's not. We all rush to judgment and think because we got one side of it, we know everything about it until we get the other side of it. And then we go, well, he didn't tell me that, or she didn't tell me that part. Oh yeah, you can leave something out of a story and all of a sudden the whole thing changes based on the information. The Bible says if you answer a matter before you hear it, there's more hope of a fool than you. I would encourage you that when you hear something, get the other side of it before you make up your mind about anything. Because you haven't heard both sides. I mean, if somebody went to court against you and the prosecuting attorney got up and said he's this and he's that and throw the book at him, and the judge says, you're right, I'm going to throw the book at him. I'm not even going to let him have a defense. We're not even going to hear his side. Would that be fair? No. Okay, enough said about that. Anyway, I'm just saying sometimes you just have to let God vindicate you, and sometimes it takes time. And the only thing you can keep from doing is getting very angry and upset, and you want to pray the wrath of God down on some people, and the best thing to do is just forgive them, and you know what? The Lord will come through. He really will. Okay, Job's personal righteousness mentioned here is impressive, even for a child of God in this age. Few men ever gain control at what they look at. And that is, they don't get complete control of it. He made a covenant with his eyes not to look upon a maid and then not to think about her. Okay? Now the thinking part is where the sin really comes in, not so much the looking part, because it's obvious that you cannot go looking for it, and it could find you. It could walk in front of you, okay? And so you would see it, but that didn't mean you had to think on it. For him to make that decision for his eyes, that not only would he go looking to, or go seeking to look at it, but he wasn't even going to think upon that maid. Very few men have that kind of restraint. I'm not saying you're going out looking purposely, but what I'm saying is there's enough out there. And that's the other thing. In this day and age, it is all around us. I can't imagine that, where Job's living, tending the sheep, he's got to worry about women dressing half naked walking in front of him. There's probably been some times when maybe some, I don't know who it would be, but somebody gave him the eye, winking at him or something. But he had made up his mind. He wasn't going to allow his eyes to roam and allow his mind to think, because that's when the trouble begins, and we'll see that in a minute. The one thing it says there, and I misquoted the first time, I made a covenant with mine eyes, why then should I think upon a maid? And the reason I say that is there's a verse in the New Testament, and I think most preachers have gotten it wrong. And maybe you'll disagree with me, and that's okay. But Matthew 5:28 says, but I say unto you that whosoever looketh on a woman to lust after her hath committed adultery with her already in his heart. Now, I'm not saying that lusting after a woman or looking at her is not wrong if you're gawking at her. But if this verse stands the way it stands, that if you look on a woman and there's some kind of lust in your eyes or in your heart, you've already committed adultery, then every man has committed adultery. And I don't believe that's what the verse is teaching. If you look at it closely, it says, whosoever looketh on a woman to lust after her hath committed adultery with her already in his heart. In other words, he's not only saw her, but he now desires her, and if opportunity arises, he will fulfill that desire. He's already committed adultery. Why? It's already in his heart to do it. But I don't think you can lay it on a man that, he sees something that's provocative, something that draws even in his mind some lust or whatever, that he's going to sell out his marriage for her just because he saw her. You can, whatever you want to think about that, but if everybody's committed adultery, then what good is the verse? If all men are guilty of committing adultery with their eyes just because they looked and lusted, okay. If anybody's got any insight on that, I'll be glad to listen to it. I just never could make any sense of it from reading it that, a married man that sees something that is provocative and sensual, that all of a sudden he's committed adultery because it had an effect on him. He'd have to be dead. You know what I mean? For it not to have an effect on him. And ladies, don't get too critical. You got that man because you got dressed up, you put your makeup on, you treated him at his best because you wanted that man, you got him, okay? Now what I would tell you to do is keep that man. I mean, you want him, you got him, okay? Okay, get your notch. Now keep him. Don't give him, listen, men may be lustful, but they're not stupid. They know what they have at home. Okay? And no man will throw that away if he's got everything he wants at home. Few men will. Some might, but usually that creep has already been unfaithful while you were dating him. And you know it. Don't give him a reason, is what I'm saying. Because there's always going to be something, someone, somebody, sometime, someplace that is going to let him know, if you want me, you can have me. Okay? And if you live long enough, that'll happen. Now, if you don't, well, you're probably one of them individuals got to hang a pork chop around your neck to get the dog to play with you. I'm just kidding around yet. My wife says women do this to me. I don't even notice it most of the time, but the times that I did was very forward. Okay? You say, what do? Bible says flee fornication. Get out of there. Just start backing up, see you later. Go the other direction. Don't even hang. If you hang around, that means there's thoughts there. If you're entertaining it, there's thoughts there. You got to give it to Job, man. I mean, he said, I'm not going to look on them on purpose, and I'm not going to think about them. Job had obeyed Psalm 101, verse 3, before David ever penned it. And that is, I will set no wicked thing before mine eyes. I hate the work of them that turn aside. It shall not cleave to me. So he had made that. That's a good thing. Job knew that with a look, there's where the trouble comes. Let me give you some verses on this. Genesis 3:6. And when the woman saw that the tree was good for food and that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree to be desired to make one wise, she took of the fruit thereof and did eat, and gave also to her husband with her, and he did eat. What was it? She saw that the tree was good and it was pleasant to the eyes. Started with a look. That's how sin always starts. It's usually through the eye gate. And when that happens, trouble's going to follow. In 2 Samuel 11:2, and it came to pass in at eventide that David arose from off his bed and walked upon the roof of the king's house, and from the roof he saw a woman washing herself. His eyes saw something. And the woman was very beautiful to look upon. It had an effect. Now, David should have went, whoa, and went right back. He shouldn't even have been there. It says it was the time when kings go out to war. But he stayed behind, and when he saw that, he should have just marched himself right back in there. Listen, David had more than one wife. He had wives waiting for him. He didn't need somebody else's wife. But instead, he looked, and then he took her. That's how it begins. Joshua chapter 7, verse 21. When I saw among the spoils a goodly Babylonish garment, and 200 shekels of silver, and a wedge of gold of 50 shekels weight, then I coveted them and took them, and behold, they are hid in the earth in the midst of my tent, and the silver under it. When he saw it, that's when the lust for it. It goes beyond just lusting after the opposite sex, even the same sex these days. It has to do with lusting after riches. You talk about something make people go crazy. It's when those miners, man, when they saw that gold or heard about that gold, it about drove them crazy. I mean, worked themselves to death for barely enough to even live on, because most of the gold had already been panned out, or they had some, But I can understand that. You just keep going every day thinking you're going to hit it. You ever watch them ones, the ones where these guys mine at the bottom of, like not rivers, but they're like water coming down off of mountains. Huh? Kind of like waterfalls, but it's just water descending down from a mountain, and they literally dive under. They somehow create it to where they can withstand the force of the water coming down, and they dive down and they move all the rocks, the huge rocks. I mean, they have to tow them out of the way. They got all kinds of stuff overhead that they set up, and then they vacuum the very bottom of that and get gold. But most every season we watch, it was kind of interesting because it's actually very interesting how they do it. But they don't get, I don't know, maybe 30 ounces of gold they spent $30,000. They didn't hardly make anything. And then every now and then they bring in a whole bunch of gold. But talk about dangerous. Talk about putting your life on the line. But there's a lust, a drive that they want to find that gold. The Bible says they that will be rich, they have a desire. They fall into many hurtful and deceitful lust. Where was I at here? The eye affects the heart. What you see with the eye can affect your heart. Lamentations 3:51 says, mine eye affecteth mine heart because of the daughters of my city. Now Jeremiah's writing that. He's probably writing that because of what happened to the daughters of Jerusalem when Nebuchadnezzar came in. Conquering armies are never kind to the women folk. It's always brutality. It's always rape and things like that, and horrible things. When the Japanese went into China, Nanking, I mean, you can barely even read about the things that they did. They were not only bayoneting babies and using them for bayonet practice, but they were raping and then killing the women, and they were raping little girls. It's an awful thing that happened there. I can understand why the Chinese hate the Japanese, and everybody's got a reason to hate the other nation, if you look at history. Matthew chapter 6, verse 22 to 24, the Bible says, the light of the body is the eye. If therefore thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. In other words, you've got it on just one thing. You're focused and concentrate on one thing. But if thine eye be evil, thy whole body shall be full of darkness. If therefore the light that is in thee be darkness, how great is that darkness? No man can serve two masters, for either hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold to the one and despise the other. Ye cannot serve God and mammon. So you get your eyes on the wrong things, and next thing you know, and I'll tell you what, it doesn't just happen to teenagers or younger folks. It can happen to us older folks. Just get your eye on something, get set on something, and next thing you know, you got that thing before God. It doesn't even have to be sinful to be wrong. It just has to be put in front of God. I was telling you about during the message about the financial world and how that drew me into it. And next thing you know, I was just all about this and that, until I lost a bunch of money, and then I wasn't about this and that. And the Lord had to teach me something there. When the eyes get full, sinful conduct is about to follow. And that's where 2 Peter 2:14 says, having eyes full of adultery that cannot cease from sin. The more you expose your eyes to it, the more you look at it, the more you contemplate it, and you think on those things, when the opportunity arises, or you even seek opportunity, that's when it's going to happen. Usually when someone's made up their mind about this kind of sin, they made up their mind a while back. And they're just looking for the opportunity, and the devil's going to oblige. He's going to provide that opportunity. Thing to do is confess that kind of thing. And here's another verse, though. Proverbs 4, verse 23 to 25 says, keep thy heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life. Put away from thee a froward mouth. That's a perverse mouth. Well, he says froward, perverse lips, okay? Put far from thee, let thine eyes look right on, and let thine eyelids look straight before thee. Best word of advice is keep your eyes on what you should keep your eyes on, and keep your mind on your own business. A lot of times that'll really work. When you start looking at everybody else, and thinking on them, usually there's problems. I'm trying to think of a verse now. I can't think of it. It's about meddling with your neighbors, like taking a dog by both ears. Have you ever done that? I have. I've had a few dogs and grab them by both ears, and they're trying to bite you, and they're going to get one arm or the other. You just got to which one you're willing to sacrifice. Because they're going, ha, 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 and you're just like, whoa, and you got to let go of him sometime. You're like this, and usually he's going to, I wasn't trying to be mean. I was playing with the dog, but he was letting me know that he was going to bite me. I was a kid. Anyway, that's meddling in somebody else's business, and the best thing to do is don't do that. You've got enough problems of your own. Sufficient to the day is the evil thereof. I got enough problems of my own without worrying and looking on somebody else. And if you know what, if you're that concerned for them, pray for them. Amen? Pray for them. Okay, he says there in verse 2, for what portion of God is there from above, and what inheritance of the Almighty from on high? Our Bible teaches us in 1 Corinthians 6, verse 9 to 11, there's no inheritance for the wicked. Now you got to watch how you read this verse. It says, know ye not that the unrighteous shall not inherit the kingdom of God? Is that you? Well, no. You have the righteousness of Jesus Christ. You've got imputed righteousness. He says, be not deceived, neither fornicators, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor effeminate, nor abusers of themselves with mankind. I mean, there's the worst of the lot right there. But then he says, nor thieves, nor covetous, nor drunkards, nor revilers, nor extortioners shall inherit the kingdom of God. He's telling you that unsaved, wicked people like this don't inherit the kingdom of God. It's kind of a, okay, you're right, Lord, we already knew that. But he's stating it. Because he says, and such were some of you. Right? But you're washed, but you're sanctified, but you're justified in the name of the Lord Jesus and by the Spirit of our God. He's letting you know, he says, look, and in fact, in another passage, he says, look, the wrath of God comes upon these people. Why would you be involved in it anymore? Why would you be a part of it anymore? And it definitely could affect your inheritance. Now, how many of you believe that David's going to reign as king over Jerusalem, or he's going to reign as king over Israel in the millennium? Did he commit adultery? Did he commit murder? Is he still going to reign? Was there repentance on his part? Yes. Did the Lord exact from him 4 sheep for a sheep? Yes. I mean, he paid dearly for it, and we'll be even mentioning that. But so I think, you know what I think? I think Christians mess up. They do things they wish they hadn't done. I think they can move on from it. Depending on what it is, how they can move on. I think you can make a mess of the ministry that maybe the ministry is not for you after that. Because there are just certain things that if you do them, you are no longer blameless before a congregation. And that's got to be taken into consideration. But will God forgive you and you can go on? Well, of course. If we confess our sins, doesn't say except for the bad ones. It's even the bad ones. The thing to do is don't get caught up in that because you'll pay too much. I guarantee you that you'll pay too much and you won't want to pay it. We can see David over that. Now, which brings these up. Look at verse 3. Is not destruction to the wicked? Yeah. And a strange punishment to the workers of iniquity. Why put in strange punishment? Because sometimes when you involve yourself in something that's sinful, it has either a cascading effect or an series of unfortunate events that follow what you did wrong. And the Lord allows that thing to go that course. I'll give you an example. In Genesis 34, verse 1 to 2, let me read this to you. And Dinah, the daughter of Leah, which she bare to Jacob, went out to see the daughters of the land. And when Shechem, the son of Hamor, the Hivite, prince of the country, saw her, he took her and lay with her and defiled her. Okay? Now, we used to call that rape, but evidently she fell in love with him. Okay? And she wants to be with him. Now, he did defile her. Okay? And how this thing ends up is that Jacob has made up his mind he's just going to let them marry and go off and do whatever. But her brothers, and this is in verse 25, and it came to pass on the 3rd day, her brothers concocted this thing where they told the men of the city of Shechem that if you'll get circumcised like we are, then we'll marry your women and your women can marry our men. Deceived them. Because it says that it came to pass on the 3rd day that when they were sore, these are grown men, that 2 of the sons of Jacob, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brethren, took each man his sword, and came upon the city boldly and slew all the males. Wouldn't you think that's a strange punishment? I mean, it started out, just the prince and Dinah, and it ended up being they slew every man in the city. And Jacob wasn't happy about that, by the way. That's the way sin is. It'll go sideways on you in a second. When Amnon rapes his half-sister, it starts a progression of sin and death and vengeance. And I can't even tell you where that thing ended because it just kind of kept going. David's affair with Bathsheba cost him more than he ever wanted to pay. And that was vengeance, a coup. I mean, even betrayal by probably his most, I won't say beloved general. I'm not sure that he loved Joab, but one of his most loyal generals. You ever read that thing about Joab? Joab comes to David after the coup, and no, I take that back. Joab comes to David after, what's his name? Absalom has fled because he's killed Amnon, because Amnon raped his sister. And so Absalom is been banished, or at least he's outside the kingdom, and Joab is the one that facilitates for Absalom to come back in and be with the king. I mean, Absalom's just saying, you got to let your boy come back. You need your boy. Well, he lets the boy back. What does the boy do? He has a coup against David. Runs David out of the kingdom. You know what Joab does the next time he sees Absalom? He puts a couple darts through his heart. And David didn't forget that and told Solomon, said, you bring down his gray hair to the grave. But you see how sin works? Man, it can get downright awful. So he says there, whoops, I'm on the wrong. That verse says, is not destruction to the wicked and strange punishment to the workers of iniquity. It could end up being more than what you ever thought, and it could be the strangest things you ever thought. Verse 4 to verse 8, it says, doth not he see my ways and count all my steps? If I have walked with vanity, or if my foot hath hasted to deceit, let me be weighed in an even balance, that God may know mine integrity. If my step hath turned out of the way, and mine heart walked after mine eyes, and if any blot hath cleaved to mine hands, then let me sow, and let another eat. Yea, let my offspring be rooted out. So we have a progression of sin here, where the eyes look, the heart lust after the eyes, and the steps turn out of the way to carry out the lust of the heart. Job's denying all that. Says that never happened. Job wants to be, in verse 6, Job wants to be weighed in an even balance. He doesn't say a just balance. You say, well, an even balance. Well, hold it now. An even balance, just because the scale's even doesn't mean it's just. Okay, if you don't put anything on one end of that, how are you going to weigh the other side? I mean, you got to have a weight. You got to have a measurement. And I'm not sure what he's saying there when he says, let me be weighed in an even balance. Well, the balance should be even when you start anyway, but then you have to put one weight on one side, one weight on the other. We call that a tear weight first. You tear the weight so everything's right, and then you put the measurements on there, but you want that thing to be even, of course. I think Job is wanting to be measured by who he knows, not who he doesn't know. He says, okay, that is, weigh me against my friends, weigh me against any Gentile of any origin, and I will shine. And listen, I have no doubt in my mind he would. I mean, you could scour the entire East. Said he was the greatest man in the East. You could scour the entire East, and I'll bet you nobody had the moral fortitude and fiber that Job had. I'm certain of that. So Job knows what he's saying. He says, okay, even these three, put me on the balance and see. I don't think they'd measure up. So Job is right as long as it's sinful men he is compared to. But the balance requires a standard on one end to assure the weight is just on the other end. So God's going to put Jesus Christ on the one end because he is the standard of righteousness, and you on the other. So that would be like Job's righteousness. It would be like measuring a feather against an ocean liner. He ain't going to make it. I'm kind of understanding now how this applies to Israel. Israel's a standard of a people against any people. They live pretty good. They live pretty righteous lives. Okay? I'm not saying all Jews. I mean, they'll take a Gentile. They'll put him through the paces when it comes to business. That's why you don't, Bible says you're not to yoke up with an unbeliever, and especially a Jew. You'll wind up like Laban. You'll wind up with the short end of the lambs and goats when he's done with you. But I can understand how that Jew thinks that he is righteous, or that at that scale, if you put anybody on that scale, we measure up. We measure up. But then Jesus Christ comes along. What'd they do? Killed him. Crucified him. They rejected him. Romans 10, 1-3 says, Brethren, my heart's desire and prayer to God for Israel is that they might be saved. For I bear them record that they have a zeal of God, but not according to knowledge. For they, being ignorant of God's righteousness, and going about to establish their own righteousness, have not submitted themselves unto the righteousness of God. For Christ is the end of the law for righteousness to everyone that believeth. And that's what they missed. That's what Job's missing. The righteousness of God. He sees his own righteousness. He sees everybody else's, and he says, I'm good. And God says, no, you're not. For all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. Until you've compared yourself to God's righteousness or the standard of Jesus Christ, the man Christ Jesus, then you find out you don't measure up at all. We keep running into this because Job is always talking about his integrity, and the man is a good man. By any human standard, he is head and shoulders above anybody else. Job says, all right, if I'm guilty or there's a blot on me in verse 7, if any blot hath cleaved to mine hands, he says, let another take all that I have. Well, for Israel, this has been a present reality for about 2,000 years of some Gentile coming in and taking what they had and running them out of Dodge. I mean, they've been run out of more places. What do you call that when you ban them? Are you banished? They've been banished, huh? Exiled, banished from the land. That's been going on. It just didn't happen in Nazi Germany, man. We're talking about a history for 2,000 years has been happening. Everybody's had their hand against that Jew at one time, seems like. Matthew 27:25, then answered all the people and said, his blood be on us and on our children. There is a blot. Although Job did not do this, he has the same mentality of those who did and are rejecting the judgments of Deuteronomy 28 that had been on them for 2 millennia. In other words, even though Job hasn't done this, I mean, he didn't even know who the Savior was. He didn't say his blood be upon us and upon our children. He's got the same mentality. Why? He thinks he's righteous. He thinks that he's getting a bad shake here. That Jew believes he's getting a bad deal from God. Many of them stop believing in God because it's been so horrible. But there's a blot. There's a blot out there that's been against him for 2 millennia. And Deuteronomy 28, if you read that, Dr. Ruckman labeled it as the worst chapter in the Bible. And it's where God goes after that Jew. If they turn around and reject him, or they worship false gods or whatever, that God will turn around and perform all the curses against him that are in this book. And man, when you read that, it's like, whoa. And over 2,000 years, God has probably fulfilled every one of those. Now, in verse 8, he says, then let me sow, Or if I'm guilty, then let me sow and let another eat. Yea, let my offspring be rooted out. Well, I can't tell you how many times that's happened. Not only in Nazi Germany, where the kids were the first ones gassed. And they took everything that they had. Job's saying that if Job doesn't believe the fact that his children are dead because he's stating it like they're still alive, because what he's saying is, I'm not guilty of this. What happened to my children is not because of that. And if I were guilty, then let them be rooted up. Hold on here a second. I got verses in front of verses. Okay, the blot of verse 7 that he also mentions can be the mark of the beast in the tribulation. Notice he says there, and if any blot hath cleaved to mine hands. Where do they put the mark? On their hands or their forehead? The Jews as a whole refuse the mark and are hunted down and beheaded. That's what happens to them. Revelation 13, verse 15 and 16. I had something else here I wanted to show. Okay, it's down at the bottom. Okay. Let's see. The offspring are rooted out in great tribulation. Let me give you a couple verses here. Verse 8 is where we're at. And it says in Luke 21:23, but woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days, for there shall be great distress in the land, and wrath upon this people. So, tribulation, their children are going to be rooted out. Why? Well, when they have to flee Jerusalem, only the swift of foot, those that are agile, if you got kids, you got to carry. I mean, any kid under 3, you'd have to carry. I don't even think a 4-year-old will keep up with a dead run. But he tells them that if they're with child, they're not going to make it. So they're going to become casualties, or they're going to be captured, or they're going to be enslaved, or they're going to be sold, or whatever. It's interesting that Jesus says this in Luke 23, verse 28 and 29. But Jesus turning unto them said, daughters of Jerusalem, weep not for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children. For behold, the days are coming, in the which that they shall say, blessed are the barren, and the wombs that never bare, and the paps which never gave suck. There are 2 fulfillments to that passage, 2 of them. When he says that, I mean, he is bearing that cross to Calvary, but when he says that, within 40 years, that verse is going to be fulfilled, and then it's going to be fulfilled a second time. Within 37 years, or around 70 A.D., these would be the babies that were born when the babies who were born around Christ's crucifixion will have grown to adults and had children. Right? Because we're talking 37 years in the future. The babies, he said, your children, pray for your children. Why? Their babies are going to be the ones that Titus destroyed when they come into Jerusalem, and they're just hacking and bayoneting and swording them and everything else. It's interesting. It was their grandchildren, but they're also their children that went through that. Weep for yourselves and weep for your children. This will be fulfilled in the Great Tribulation. When the Antichrist army attacks Jerusalem, he said, and woe to them that are with child, to them that give suck in those days, Matthew 24:19. So they will not escape. And they're going to pay. When Job says that, he says, then let me sow and let another eat, yea, let my offspring be rooted out. Well, because of that blot, now they're going to refuse the mark. Most of the Jews will. But there'll be, there's another blot that's against them, and that's the blot that's got to be taken care of. When they called for Christ's crucifixion and said, his blood be upon us and upon our children, has been ever since. Now, one of these days, they're going to get that thing taken care of. But if Job is the type of the remnant, what he's saying there is something against them. There's been something against that Jew for 2,000 years now, and I think it's kind of obvious that God has miraculously preserved them, but I wouldn't go so far as to say He's blessed them all that much, because when you read back through history, they're just continually getting it in the neck. And usually they're stealing everything they got, taking everything they've got. Okay, that's what I have for tonight. Anybody got a question or comment? Okay. All right, we got done a little early. Okay. Y'all too quiet.